If you look around, almost all manufactured goods are made in China. They're also one of the world's technological hubs, with brands such as Apple and Tesla taking interest in their innovative manufacturing sites. China currently has the second biggest economy after the United States, with the United States taking over 41.9% share of the entire world's GDP, and China having 34.75% of the entire world's GDP. That's a huge number if we think about it, because both the US and China are accountable for almost 77% of the whole world's GDP. This is why the next country on the list, Japan, has fewer numbers than China. The growth of China's GDP has been dramatic, from only 11% of the US in 1960 to 67% in 2019. Today, China is known for their technological prowess, having started their innovation machine right after the 1970s reform. This country has the most number of STEM graduates and patents filed in the world. It's no wonder they're dominating the market nowadays. Looking at China now, we can see their big ambition has led to economic success. How did China manage to turn around in such a short time? And at what cost is all this success achieved? This is a dark side of China. Previously, China was ridden with disastrous policies. Before its economic reform, China had its bloodiest period yet, the Cultural Revolution, which was a policy created by its former leader, Mao Zedong, where 2 million of its population died. The Great Cultural Revolution was established in 1966 as an attempt to assert control over the communists by Chairman Mao. This decision proved to be deadly not only to his political enemies but also to the Chinese people in general. Mao had set up his Red Guards to abolish the four olds: old ideas, old customs, old habits, and old culture to take China into a new, prosperous age. This is when schools, universities, churches, and other places of worship are shut down. Chaos ensued and frictions between intellectuals and authorities were everywhere. Historians estimated between 500,000 to 2 million lives were lost due to conflicts, starvation, or the Great Famine due to ineffective farming methods and poverty during the era. This era ended when Mao died in 1976, but the start of China's economic dominance was just beginning. The end of the Cultural Revolution kickstarted the reform created by Deng Xiaoping, in which he stated that the people of China will start to emancipate their minds. This effort was done to undo the disasters caused by the Cultural Revolution. And lo and behold, it did. They took gradual steps by opening up trade and welcoming foreign investment, moving from a centralized economy to a mixed economy. This reform also focused on infrastructure building. Case example, China's $1 trillion Belt and Road initiatives that aim to expand China's dominance internationally. They've also created special economic zones in coastal areas that are easily accessible to international waters, such as Shenzhen and Xiamen. In these special economic zones, the regulation is particularly lenient for foreign investors, which explains why there are so many foreign manufacturing sites in those regions. And now, the country has successfully shifted from a recluse that exports iron as its biggest production to a manufacturing and services powerhouse we're familiar with. For every positive aspect, there's always a dark side, and China's reform is not an exception. One issue that China might face is its shrinking population. This is due to China's one-child policy that was introduced in the early 1980s, which they created to fix the issues from the Cultural Revolution and to limit the population growth that was out of control at the time. But this was proven to be fatal, with people preferring male babies to females and creating a skewed gender ratio in the country, which led to a large number of leftover men who were unable to marry due to a shortage of female population. This also damaged the pyramid of age in terms of population in China. Because they halted the birth rate in the 80s by having the one-child policy, right now the aging population is taking over instead of the productive people in their 20s to 40s. This is why China announced the end of the one-child policy in 2015 and resorted to implementing a two-child policy. Time will tell if this policy will fix the skewed population in China. With grueling targets to chase their production and manufacturing goals, harsh conditions are abundant in China's plants. Workers are commonly facing forced overtime, tight shifts, autocratic management, and with wages that are well below the standard of living. Chinese factories often ask their employees to work over 74 hours per week, with overtime ranging from 52 to 136 hours. Not only that, but they're also often exposed to toxic chemicals without proper protection and harsh treatment from their supervisors. They're also sometimes forced to stand over 10 hours at a time on factory floors covered in oil spills, which can cause slipping or falling and ultimately injuries. Chinese workers are reported to have poor job satisfaction because of uninteresting work, low pay, and lack of opportunities for advancement. This leads us to another factor that could jeopardize China's economic advancement: the toxic 996 work culture, which people call fancy labor exploitation. 996 work culture refers to starting work at 9 a.m. and finishing at 9 p.m., 6 days a week, which means in total 72 hours per week. They embedded this culture into their workers as a sacrifice they have to make as a virtue, and something they do for the greater good. Manufacturers or factories can freely do this because of relaxed labor laws that tends to side with the big companies. Thankfully, in August 2021, Chinese Supreme Court deemed the practice to be illegal. They have now asked all companies to stand by the standards and regulations set by the Ministry of Human Resources to avoid burnout. It's no surprise then that a lot of young Chinese professionals are now rebelling against the overworking culture. Starting in the year 2022, the lying flat or Tang Ping movement have seen Chinese workers put their careers second. This is also caused by the shrinking labor force in China. As mentioned earlier, there's a shortage of productive age population in China. Some even opted to quit their job and take on lower paying ones in rural areas to have a slower paced life. Furthermore, now the trend has gone to the extreme. Younger generations are now taking a step further from lying flat and dubbed "let it rot" as the new trend. This refers to people giving up rather than fixing the situation and letting it deteriorate without any effort at all. Burnout does not only happen in the workforce, it is also happening in Chinese students. Extra lessons or private tutoring are done as early as preschool ages, with kids as young as 3 years old joining intensive studying sessions. The competition is harsh nowadays, and with only one child as their beacon of hope, many parents resort to putting all efforts into one child to succeed as much as possible. This anxiety has given way to the creation of a multi-billion-dollar industry: cram schools. Normal student life includes studying non-stop from 6:50 a.m. to 9:50 p.m., which leaves no time for social life and rest. Some parents can spend up to 20,000 yuan per year, or almost US $2,900, for cram schools to give their children a fighting edge in this highly competitive landscape. Being pushed until the breaking point from a young age, it's no wonder the younger Chinese generation is experiencing burnout. Another phenomenon in this country is the left-behind villages. Because of industrialization, most of the country's productive-aged population has moved into the cities to get a job in the manufacturing industry. Millions of people have done so, and what's left is an abandoned village with children and an old-aged population. Often they are left in rural areas to avoid paying high prices of living in the city for more family members. Some people have resorted to leaving their children with their grandparents, but those who do not have grandparents are forced to live alone in villages and are dubbed the left-behind children. It is said that over 60 million families in China are doing this, clinging to the hope of a better life in the future. With all of these issues, China's economy is already in deep trouble in recent years. Although China is already trying to adjust their errors by removing certain policies, such as the one-child policy and stricter labor laws, the jury is still out on whether China can maintain their superpower moniker in the future.